You were never Dad's favorite anyway. This money belongs with someone who'll honor his legacy." Those words from my sister Rebecca hung in the sterile hospital air like poison. I lay motionless in my bed, the steady beep of heart monitors providing a rhythmic backdrop to her cruelty. My broken leg throbbed beneath its cast, but that pain was nothing compared to the knife she had just twisted in my heart. I studied her face, the triumphant gleam in her eyes, the slight upward curve of her lips. She wasn't just delivering news. She was savoring this moment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rebecca had come to my hospital room not out of concern for my recovery after the skiing accident, but to announce that she had manipulated our father's will during my 2-week coma. According to her, every cent of my inheritance, the family business, the lake house, the investment accounts, now belonged to her. "I thought you should hear it from me," she continued, smoothing her designer blazer with manicured fingers. "Dad always worried you'd squander everything he built. This way, the family legacy stays intact." The irony almost made me laugh. If only she knew. "I understand," I replied, my voice calm and measured. "Thanks for telling me in person." Rebecca blinked, her self-satisfied expression faltering for just a moment. She had expected tears, outrage, begging, anything but this quiet acceptance. That brief flicker of confusion in her eyes was the first indication that she had severely underestimated me. I might have been physically broken, but mentally, I was 3 steps ahead of her game. When she left, clicking down the hospital corridor in her expensive heels, I finally allowed myself a small smile. Rebecca thought she had executed the perfect betrayal. She had no idea that 6 months earlier, I had already moved every valuable asset out of our father's estate. The lake house she thought she'd claimed, transferred to a trust she couldn't touch. The family business she believed was her crown jewel, restructured with ironclad protections she couldn't penetrate. The investment accounts she was already mentally spending. Empty vessels, with the real funds secured elsewhere. I pressed the nurse call button, asking for my phone. It was time to set the final phase in motion. My father, Jonathan Mercer, had built Mercer Pharmaceuticals from a small research lab into a leading manufacturer of specialized medications. He was brilliant with formulas, but less adept at family dynamics. After my mother died when I was 12, he retreated into his work, leaving Rebecca and me to essentially raise ourselves in our sprawling New England home. Rebecca, 4 years. My senior had always been the charmer, socially graceful, outwardly perfect, and masterful at telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. I was the quiet one, observant, analytical, more comfortable with spreadsheets than social gatherings. Dad appreciated my business acumen, but was dazzled by Rebecca's charisma. She knew precisely how to make him feel like the father of the year, with minimal effort. What Rebecca never understood was that being overlooked had its advantages. While she was busy performing the role of perfect daughter, I was learning how the company operated from the ground up. I spent college summers in every department, befriending the employees she considered beneath her. When I joined the company, officially after business school, I made it my mission to understand every aspect of the operation Dad had built. 3 years ago, when Dad was diagnosed with early-onset dementia, everything changed. I noticed the subtle signs first: forgotten meetings, repeated stories, unusual financial decisions. When I finally convinced him to see a specialist, the diagnosis confirmed my fears. His brilliant mind was beginning to fail him. Rebecca's response was immediate and calculated. She moved back to the family estate, ostensibly to help care for Dad, and began positioning herself as his primary caregiver and confidant. To the outside world, she was the devoted daughter sacrificing her own life to support our ailing father. Behind closed doors, she was systematically isolating him from everyone else, including me. At first, I tried reasoning with her. "We need to work together on Dad's care plan," I told her during one of our increasingly tense family dinners. "I've got it handled," she replied dismissively. "You focus on the business. That's what Dad wants." But it became clear that Rebecca was doing more than just caring for Dad. Business associates began mentioning strange calls from her, claiming she had power of attorney over various matters. Family friends reported that she had told them I was too busy to visit Dad regularly, when in reality, she was scheduling my visits for times she knew I had unmovable meetings. The situation reached a breaking point when Dad called me in confusion. One evening, "Emma, Rebecca says I signed some papers transferring my voting shares to her. Did I do that?" The situation reached a breaking point when Dad called me in confusion one evening. "Emma, Rebecca says I signed some papers transferring my voting shares to her. Did I do that?" That night, I consulted Martin Calloway, Dad's longtime attorney, and one of the few people who had seen through Rebecca's facade for years. "Your sister is taking advantage of your father's condition," Martin said gravely, his weathered face somber in the low light of his office. "I've seen this before, and it rarely ends well for families." "What can we do?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Legally challenge her actions, but that would mean publicly declaring your father incompetent." He paused, understanding the impossible choice this presented. Or what? "We could protect the assets preemptively, through legal means your sister wouldn't immediately detect." That conversation set everything in motion. Over the next 6 months, with Martin's guidance, I quietly restructured the most valuable assets in Dad's estate. We established an irrevocable trust with carefully selected trustees. We reorganized the business ownership structure to ensure continued operation, regardless of who claimed control. We created a separate medical trust to guarantee Dad would always receive the best care. All of this was done legally, with Dad's consent during his lucid periods, thoroughly documented by medical professionals and witnessed by independent parties. I didn't take a penny for myself. Everything was secured for its intended purpose or for Dad's care. I simply made it impossible for Rebecca to seize control. These precautions were my insurance policy, one I prayed I'd never need to use. Part of me hoped that Rebecca would prove me wrong, that her intentions were better than I feared. Then came the skiing trip to Vermont, a rare weekend away after months of 16-hour workdays balancing company operations and Dad's care coordination. I still don't remember the accident clearly. Witnesses said another skier collided with me on a particularly steep run. I remember the sensation of flying, then nothing for 2 weeks. I woke from the coma to find that Rebecca had wasted no time. She had told the hospital staff she was my only family and my medical proxy. She had restricted visitors to reduce stress. And most significantly, she had convinced a judge that Dad's deteriorating condition necessitated an emergency transfer of his estate to her exclusive control. Now, as I lay in my hospital bed watching her walk away, I realized that my suspicions hadn't been paranoia. They had been foresight. Rebecca had shown her true colors, exactly as I'd feared she would. I picked up my phone and texted Martin. She made her move. Time for Plan B. His response came immediately. "Already in motion. Everything is in place." I rested my head back against the pillow, mentally preparing for what would come next. Rebecca thought she had won everything, but her victory celebration was premature. She had no idea what awaited her when she tried to access what she thought she had stolen. Sometimes, the quiet ones are quiet because they're watching, learning, planning. And I had been planning for this moment for a very long time. The path that led to my hospital confrontation with Rebecca began long before my father's diagnosis. Looking back, I should have recognized the pattern years earlier. After graduating from Wharton with my MBA, I returned home with grand plans for modernizing Mercer Pharmaceuticals. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dad welcomed me into the company with pride, giving me a small but growing role in operations. Start from the ground up, he advised. That's how you'll truly understand what we've built. I took his words to heart, working alongside researchers, production staff, and sales teams to learn every aspect of the business. The employees, many who had known me since I was a child visiting Dad's office, appreciated my genuine interest in their work. They shared insights no executive meeting would ever reveal. Rebecca, meanwhile, had built a carefully curated life in Manhattan. She worked nominally in public relations, though her job seemed to primarily involve attending charity galas and maintaining relationships with the city's elite. Whenever she visited home, she arrived like a whirlwind, full of stories, name-dropping, celebrities, and bringing expensive gifts that impressed Dad but revealed how little she knew about his actual interests. Dad doesn't even drink whiskey, I pointed out when she presented him with a $500 bottle of scotch one Christmas. It's for his collection, she replied dismissively, though he had never collected spirits. What Rebecca lacked in attention to detail, she made up for in performance. She knew exactly when to laugh at Dad's old industry jokes, when to ask questions that made him feel important, and when to remind him of his accomplishments. In contrast, my conversations with him often focused on company challenges and market threats, necessary topics that didn't necessarily leave him feeling celebrated. The first real warning sign came during a family dinner 3 years ago. Dad had invited his executive team and their spouses to our home, an annual tradition that combined business and pleasure. I had spent weeks preparing a presentation on a promising new research direction for the company, hoping to impress not just Dad, but also Dr. Lowell, our head of R&D. Minutes before I was scheduled to speak, Rebecca cornered me in the kitchen. "Emma, I think you should wait on your presentation," she said, refilling her wine glass. "Dad mentioned he's tired tonight. Maybe email it tomorrow instead." Something in her too casual tone raised my suspicions. "He specifically asked me to present tonight." She shrugged. "I just spoke with him. He's changed his mind but didn't want to disappoint you." Trusting her, a mistake I wouldn't repeat, I agreed to postpone. Later, I overheard Rebecca telling Dad that I had decided not to present because the research isn't ready yet. Before I could correct this mischaracterization, she smoothly transitioned to introducing her boyfriend at the time, a venture capitalist who spent the rest of the evening pitching Dad on investments unrelated to pharmaceuticals. The pattern repeated with increasing frequency. Important emails I sent to Dad would go accidentally to his spam folder. Meetings I scheduled would be mistakenly overwritten in his calendar. Documents I left for his review would mysteriously disappear, only to be found by Rebecca after. Decisions had already been made. These incidents seemed like annoying coincidences until Dad's diagnosis. After that, they revealed themselves as rehearsals for the main event. Dad's decline was both gradual and sudden, the way ice appears solid, until the moment you fall through. Some days he was perfectly lucid, discussing complex molecular formulations and remembering conversations from weeks prior. Other days, he would ask the same question repeatedly, or mistake me for my mother. His doctor explained that this fluctuation was typical. "He'll have good days and bad days," Dr. Peterson said gently. "The good days may give you false hope, but the overall trajectory is unfortunately predictable." What the doctor didn't warn us about was how this condition could be exploited by someone with ulterior motives. Rebecca moved back home with remarkable speed after the diagnosis, giving up her Manhattan apartment and installing herself in our father's wing of the house. "It just makes sense," she explained to me over coffee one morning, her voice reasonable and concerned. "Someone needs to be with him constantly, and you have the company to run." Her logic seemed sound. I was working 14-hour days maintaining operations while simultaneously researching experimental treatments for Dad's condition. Having Rebecca handle his day-to-day care appeared to be the perfect solution. Within weeks, however, she had established new household rules. Dad's longtime housekeeper, Maria, who had been with our family for 20 years, was dismissed for repeatedly upsetting Dad with her forgetfulness, though Maria later called me in tears, explaining that Rebecca had deliberately changed Dad's routines and then blamed Maria when he became confused. Next, Rebecca hired a new private nurse, dismissing the one recommended by Dr. Peterson. The new nurse, Heather, reported exclusively to Rebecca and seemed perpetually unable to accommodate my visits during her shifts. "He needs consistency," Rebecca explained when I confronted her. "Your unpredictable schedule upsets him." The most alarming change was Dad's sudden isolation from his oldest friends. Chester Williams, his college roommate and fishing companion, for 40 years called me concerned. "I've tried visiting Jonathan 4 times in the past month," Chester said, his normally booming voice subdued. "Each time Rebecca says he's resting or having a bad day. Is he really doing that poorly?" He wasn't. In fact, I had seen him the previous weekend during one of his good days, when Rebecca had traveled to New York for what she described as meetings about Dad's care. He had specifically asked about Chester, wondering why his friend hadn't visited. Recently, the pattern became clear. Rebecca was systematically cutting Dad off from everyone except herself. More disturbingly, she was using his intermittent confusion to rewrite reality, telling him that people weren't visiting because they were uncomfortable with his condition, when in truth she was turning them away. I tried addressing this directly during one of our increasingly rare family dinners. "Dad needs his support network," I argued. "His friends bring him joy and stimulation. The doctor said maintaining social connections is crucial for cognitive health." Rebecca's expression was a perfect blend of patience and pity. "Emma, you're not here during his episodes. Yesterday, Chester's visit triggered a major setback. Dad didn't recognize him and became extremely agitated. Dr. Williams agrees that limiting unfamiliar visitors is best right now." "Dr. Williams?" I asked, confused. "Dad's neurologist is Dr. Peterson." A flicker of annoyance crossed her face before she recovered. "Yes, Dr. Williams is the specialist I consulted for a second opinion. He's written several books on dementia care." Later that night, I searched for this Dr. Williams. He didn't exist, at least not as a dementia specialist with published works. When I confronted Rebecca with this information the next morning, she dismissed it with a wave. I misspoke. "It's Dr. Williamson. You're missing the point, Emma. Dad needs consistency and calm, not interrogations about his medical team." That night, I called Martin Calloway. I had known him my entire life. He was more than Dad's attorney. He was a family friend who had helped draft my first business proposal when I was 16. If anyone would give me honest advice, it would be Martin. We met at his office after hours, the downtown streets quiet except for the occasional passing car. Martin listened carefully as I detailed Rebecca's behavior, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "I know how this sounds," I concluded. "Like I'm paranoid or jealous, but something isn't right." Martin removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It doesn't sound paranoid to me, Emma. It sounds like textbook undue influence. I've seen this pattern before, particularly with vulnerable individuals with significant assets." "What should I do?" "I don't want to upset Dad with accusations. First, we document everything. Next, we quietly review your father's current legal and financial situation. And most importantly," he leaned forward, his voice firm, "we create safeguards while we still can." As I left Martin's office that night, a weight lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't imagining things, and I wasn't alone in my concerns. What I didn't realize then was that Rebecca's manipulation had only just begun, and that our countermeasures would need to be executed with perfect precision to protect everything our father had built. The morning after my meeting with Martin, I arrived, At the office earlier than usual. The Mercer Pharmaceuticals headquarters, a sleek glass building my father had designed himself, was mostly empty, with only the night security guard nodding as I passed through the lobby. In the quiet of my office, I created a detailed timeline of Rebecca's behavior since Dad's diagnosis. Each incident, viewed in isolation, could be dismissed as a misunderstanding. Together, they formed an unmistakable pattern of calculation. My phone rang precisely at 8 a.m. Martin, always punctual. "I've reviewed your father's current estate plan," he said without preamble. "There are vulnerabilities we need to address immediately. Can you bring him to my office today?" "Is that wise?" I asked, thinking of Rebecca's constant surveillance. "Absolutely. Necessary. This is still your father's company and estate. While he has capacity, even intermittent capacity, his wishes need to be documented and protected." I arranged the meeting under the guise of a routine quarterly business review. Rebecca was suspicious, but when I mentioned the company's upcoming FDA submission, she lost interest. Regulatory details bored her. "Just don't tire him out," she warned as Dad and I left the house. "He has a checkup this afternoon." There was no checkup scheduled. I had confirmed this with Dr. Peterson's office earlier that morning, but I simply nodded, helping Dad into the car. The drive downtown gave me a rare opportunity to speak with him privately. "Dad, are you happy with how things are going at home?" I asked carefully. He looked out the window, watching the familiar neighborhoods pass by. "Some days are better than others," he said finally. "Sometimes I feel crowded." By Rebecca? A hint of his old sharpness flashed in his eyes. She means well, but she hovers, and she makes decisions without asking me. Yesterday she told the gardener to remove your mother's rose bushes, said they were diseased. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Those roses had been planted by my mother 30 years ago. Dad had maintained them meticulously since her death. Were they diseased? No. His voice was certain. They were blooming beautifully last week. At Martin's office, the receptionist immediately showed us into the conference room where Martin waited with another man I didn't recognize. "Jonathan, Emma, this is Dr. Harold Winters. He's a geriatric psychiatrist specializing in cognitive assessment." Dad's expression darkened. "I've already been assessed, Martin." "This is different," Martin explained gently. "Dr. Winters is here to establish your current decision-making capacity, legally speaking. For the next hour, Dr. Winters engaged Dad in a series of conversations and exercises designed to evaluate his cognitive function. I sat quietly, witnessing both the clarity of his good moments and the confusion that occasionally clouded his thoughts. When Dr. Winters stepped out to compile his notes, Martin turned to Dad. "Jonathan, are you aware that Rebecca has been making changes to your estate plan?" Dad frowned. "She's helped me organize some papers." "Has she asked you to sign documents?" "Some. For medical things, I think." His frown deepened. "And something about the lake house." Martin and I exchanged glances. The lake house in New Hampshire had been our family's retreat for generations, and one of our most valuable assets. "Jonathan," Martin said carefully, "today I want to help you protect what matters most to you. If you're willing, we can create some safeguards that ensure your wishes are honored, regardless of what happens with your health." Dad looked at me, then back at Martin. "Like what?" "An irrevocable trust for your most important assets. A clear succession plan for Mercer Pharmaceuticals, and medical directives that can't be overridden without significant legal review." Dr. Winters returned and confirmed what we already knew. Dad was experiencing cognitive fluctuations but currently demonstrated sufficient capacity to make informed legal decisions. With this professional assessment documented, we proceeded. Over the next 4 hours, Martin guided Dad through a comprehensive restructuring of his estate. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Create legal structures that would be virtually impossible to dismantle, even with years of litigation. The family lake house was transferred to a conservation trust, ensuring it would remain in the family for generations but could never be sold or leveraged. The bulk of Dad's liquid assets were moved into a newly established foundation dedicated to Alzheimer's research. Mercer Pharmaceuticals' ownership was reorganized, with voting shares distributed among a carefully selected board of longtime executives who understood Dad's vision for the company. Most importantly, Dad's medical care was secured through an independent trust with multiple trustees, including Dr. Peterson, Martin, and myself. This arrangement ensured that no single person, not even me, could make unilateral decisions about his treatment. "What about Rebecca?" Dad asked as we finalized the documents. Despite everything, he's still worried about his eldest daughter. "She'll receive her inheritance," Martin assured him, "but she won't be able to control yours." As we drove home that afternoon, Dad seemed lighter somehow. "I've been worried," he admitted quietly. "About the business? About the house? About you and Rebecca?" "You don't need to worry anymore," I told him, reaching over to squeeze his hand. "Everything is taken care of." "Rebecca won't like this," he said, a moment of perfect lucidity in his eyes. "No," I agreed. "She won't. She's always been determined. Like your mother." He gazed out the window again. "But you have my backbone." I smiled at the unexpected compliment. "We'll be okay, Dad, I promise." What I didn't tell him was that our work had just begun. Over the next 3 months, Martin and I executed a meticulous plan to secure every aspect of Dad's legacy. We updated his medical directives, ensuring Rebecca couldn't override his wishes about experimental treatments. We restructured company leadership to create checks and balances. We even established a separate legal entity to manage the intellectual property Dad had developed over his career. Each measure was designed with a single purpose: to protect Dad's wishes, even as his ability to express them diminished. Everything was done legally, ethically, and with proper documentation. We weren't disinheriting Rebecca. She would still receive her fair share. We were simply ensuring she couldn't take more than that. The final step was perhaps the most difficult. I needed to ensure that I, too, couldn't abuse these protections. Working with Martin, I established independent oversight for every entity we created. Whatever happened, Dad's legacy would be preserved according to his true wishes, not anyone else's ambitions. As winter approached and Dad's condition continued its uneven decline, I felt a bittersweet satisfaction. The safeguards were in place. Now we just had to hope we wouldn't need them. Rebecca's first direct attack came 3 weeks after we established the trusts. I was reviewing quarterly projections in my office when my assistant buzzed to announce an unexpected visitor. Vernon Harris, the bank manager who had handled the Mercer family accounts for over a decade. "Emma," he said as he entered, his normally affable expression replaced with concern. I apologize for dropping in unannounced, but I felt this warranted immediate attention. He placed a document on my desk, a power of attorney form supposedly signed by my father, granting Rebecca exclusive control over his primary accounts. "This was submitted yesterday," Vernon explained. "The signature seemed inconsistent with your father's usual hand. Our policy requires verification when significant changes are requested." I studied the document, anger building as I noted the barely passable forgery of Dad's signature. The tremor that had developed in his right hand over the past year was conspicuously absent. "This is not my father's signature," I confirmed, "and he executed a different power of attorney arrangement last month." I retrieved a copy from my files, showing the carefully structured financial oversight committee we had established. Vernon's relief was visible. "I thought as much. We'll reject this request, of course." "Please keep this incident confidential for now," I requested. "And if my sister submits any further documents, I'll contact you directly," he promised. That evening, I called Martin to update him. my voice tight with controlled fury. "She's getting desperate," he observed. "This is good, in a way. It means she's discovered the new trust arrangements." "What happens when she confronts me?" I asked. "She probably won't," Martin replied. "A direct confrontation would force her to admit what she's been doing. More likely, she'll try more subtle approaches first." He was right. The next day, Rebecca suggested we host a small dinner for Dad's closest advisors to discuss his ongoing care. Dr. Peterson mentioned some promising experimental treatments. She explained over breakfast, her voice casual as she stirred her coffee. "But they're expensive. We should discuss liquidating some assets to cover the costs." I maintained a neutral expression, though internally I was seething. I had spoken with Dr. Peterson just yesterday. There were no experimental treatments. He was recommending. "That sounds important," I agreed. "Who were you thinking of inviting?" Her list was revealing. A new financial advisor I'd never heard of, her boyfriend Jason, who supposedly had medical connections, and conspicuously, not Martin Calloway. "What about Martin?" I asked innocently. "He's been Dad's advisor for decades." Rebecca waved dismissively. "He's so traditional in his thinking. We need fresh perspectives." I agreed to the dinner, then immediately called Dr. Peterson to confirm my suspicions. As expected, he had discussed no experimental treatments with Rebecca. In fact, he hadn't spoken with her in weeks. She had canceled Dad's last 2 appointments, claiming he was too fatigued to attend. The dinner itself was an exercise in restraint. Rebecca's new financial advisor, a slick man named Warren Pierce, presented elaborate charts showing how liquidating the underperforming assets of Mercer Pharmaceuticals could fund cutting-edge treatments for Dad. "Of course," Warren added. Smoothly, this would require consolidating decision-making authority to enable quick responses to market conditions. Jason, Rebecca's boyfriend, nodded enthusiastically. "The medical landscape changes daily. Having a streamlined approval process could mean the difference between accessing a breakthrough treatment or missing the window of opportunity." I listened, attentively, asking pointed questions that revealed neither had any substantial knowledge of pharmaceutical valuations or neurological treatments. When Warren suggested that the Lake House property represented untapped equity, I nearly laughed. Aloud, "These are all interesting perspectives," I said finally. "Before we make any decisions, I'd like to consult with Dad's established medical team and our company's board." Rebecca's smile tightened. "Of course, but we shouldn't delay too long. Dad's condition is currently stable," I finished firmly. "According to Dr. Peterson's latest assessment." A flash of irritation crossed her face before she composed herself. "Let's continue this discussion next week. Warren, could you prepare more detailed projections?" After they left, I documented the entire conversation and sent it to Martin. His response was immediate. "She's laying groundwork. Be careful." The next morning, I arrived at the office to find our head of HR waiting anxiously by my door. "Ms. Mercer, I'm sorry to bother you, but I received a concerning email last night." She handed me a printout, an email from Rebecca to the HR department, copying several board members. In it, Rebecca expressed growing concerns about my ability to balance company leadership with Dad's care, suggesting that temporary reassignment of certain executive authorities might be necessary. "She has no authority to request this," I said calmly, though my pulse was racing. "I know," the HR director assured me, "but she copied 3 board members, and they've been asking questions." This was a more sophisticated attack, attempting to undermine my professional standing while simultaneously positioning herself as the concerned caretaker. I spent the morning calling board members, carefully explaining the situation without directly accusing Rebecca of manipulation. By afternoon, the immediate crisis was contained, but I knew Rebecca was escalating. That night, I installed security cameras in Dad's home office and upgraded the locks on the filing cabinets containing his personal documents. I also scheduled daily check-ins with his medical team and house staff. creating a communication network that would alert me to any unusual activity. 2 days later, I received an urgent call from Maria, Dad's former housekeeper whom I had quietly rehired as a part-time helper. "Miss Emma," she whispered, her voice tense. "Your sister has been going through your father's office all morning. She seems very angry, throwing papers and making calls. Is Dad there?" "No, she sent him to the garden. With the nurse. He doesn't know what's happening." "Thank you, Maria. Please keep an eye on him, but don't confront Rebecca." I ended the call, a strange calm settling over me. The storm was coming. Rebecca had clearly discovered that her access to Dad's assets had been restricted. Now it was only a matter of time before she confronted me directly. That evening, as I worked late at the office preparing for the inevitable showdown, my assistant forwarded an email that confirmed my worst fears. Rebecca had scheduled an emergency board meeting for the following week, without my knowledge, with a single agenda item: leadership transition due to family medical crisis. She was making her move to take control of the company. But what she didn't know was that I had prepared for this moment since the day Dad was diagnosed. The stage was set. The protections were in place. Now we would see if they would hold. The day before Rebecca's unauthorized board meeting, a rare December snowstorm blanketed the city. I left the office early, intending to check on Dad before the roads became impassable. As I pulled into our long driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked near the entrance, a black sedan with rental plates. Inside, the house was unnaturally quiet. I found Maria in the kitchen, her expression tense. "Your sister has visitors," she whispered. "In your father's study. They've been there for hours." "Is Dad with them?" She shook her head. "He's resting upstairs. The nurse gave him something to help him sleep, a medication I hadn't authorized." My anger flared, but I kept my voice steady. "Who are these visitors?" "A man in an expensive suit. He had many papers. And another man who looks like a doctor, but not Dr. Peterson." I thanked Maria and made my way silently toward Dad's study. The door was partially open, voices drifting into the hallway. "The assessment needs to be conclusive," Rebecca was saying. "There can't be any ambiguity about his capacity." "Based on my preliminary evaluation, I can certainly attest to significant cognitive impairment," an unfamiliar male voice replied. "But a formal declaration of incompetence requires more substantial documentation." "Whatever it costs," Rebecca insisted. "The board meeting is tomorrow, and I need to show that Emma's control over his medical decisions is inappropriate." I heard enough. I pushed the door open, entering with deliberate calm. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. Rebecca, a silver-haired man with a medical bag, and a younger man clutching a leather portfolio. "Emma!" Rebecca recovered quickly, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You're home early. We were just discussing Dad's care options. With a doctor I don't recognize, and without consulting his established medical team," I observed, my tone glacial. I turned to the supposed physician. "You are?" The man cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Dr. Vaughn Mitchell. I specialize in geriatric assessments for court cases determining competency," I finished. "I'm familiar with the process." "And you," I addressed the younger man, "would be the lawyer preparing to file for guardianship, I presume?" The lawyer glanced nervously at Rebecca, who had abandoned all pretense of pleasantry. "This is a private consultation," she said coldly. "One that's necessary because you've been making decisions without proper authority." I laughed, the sound sharp in the tension-filled room. "That's an interesting accusation coming from someone who forged our father's signature on a power of attorney document." The lawyer's eyebrows shot up and he began gathering his papers. "Perhaps we should reschedule," he murmured to Rebecca. "No," she snapped. "Emma is exaggerating. Vernon Harris is an old family friend who misunderstood a routine transaction." A routine transaction that would have given you sole control over Dad's primary accounts? I challenged. Just like this routine consultation is meant to declare him incompetent so you can overturn the trust he established, Dr. Mitchell stood abruptly. I wasn't informed about any disputed legal matters. I can't conduct an evaluation under these circumstances. You'll be well compensated, Rebecca insisted, her composure slipping. The doctor shook his head. Not enough to risk my license. He gathered his bag and nodded to me. Ms. Mercer, I apologize for the intrusion. After he left, the lawyer made a similar hasty exit, muttering about conflict of interest and insufficient disclosure. Rebecca and I faced each other across Dad's mahogany desk, the desk where he had built Mercer Pharmaceuticals from ambitious plans to industry reality. What did you do? She demanded, her voice trembling with rage. The lake house, the accounts, the company shares, they're all locked in trusts I can't access. Even Dad's medical decisions require multiple approvals. Dad put those protections in place, I replied evenly. With full legal capacity, verified by an independent specialist. He wasn't thinking clearly, she shouted, abandoning all restraint. He built this company. He created this fortune. I deserve— What? I interrupted. What exactly do you deserve, Rebecca? To liquidate the company he spent his life building? To sell the lake house where we spent every summer as children? To make medical decisions for him based on invented experimental treatments? Her face flushed. You've always been jealous of my relationship with Dad. This is your revenge, using his condition to take control. I protected his legacy, I corrected her. From you. The board won't stand for this, she threatened. Tomorrow they'll see. The board meeting is canceled, I informed her calmly. I spoke with each member personally this afternoon. They're quite concerned about your unauthorized attempt to call an emergency session, particularly when I shared documentation of your recent activities. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. What documentation? I gestured toward the ceiling corner where a small security camera had been recording our entire conversation. That, plus the forged financial documents, the fraudulent medical consultations, the canceled doctor appointments, all of it, Rebecca. She stared at the camera, then back at me, calculation replacing shock. You can't prove intent? I don't need to. The trusts Dad established are legally ironclad. Your attempts to circumvent them only strengthen our case that they were necessary. Rebecca's expression hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. This isn't over. Dad's condition is deteriorating. Eventually nothing will change, I cut in. That's the point of irrevocable trusts. Even after Dad is gone, his wishes will be protected. She studied me for a long moment, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. I never thought you had this in you, she said finally. The quiet, dutiful daughter. Always in the background while I handled the important things. That was your mistake, I replied simply. You were so busy being seen that you never bothered to watch. Rebecca gathered her coat and purse, her movements precise and controlled once more. At the door, she paused. One bad moment, Emma. One mistake in running the company. One questionable decision about Dad's care. That's all I need. I'll be watching. After she left, I sank into Dad's chair, the adrenaline of confrontation giving way to bone-deep exhaustion. I had prepared for this moment, anticipated every move Rebecca might make, and still the reality of facing my sister's naked ambition had shaken me. I checked the security feed to ensure Dad was sleeping peacefully, then called Martin to update him on the confrontation. She'll regroup and try again, he warned after I recounted the evening's events. I know, I sighed. But the immediate crisis is averted. The board is solidly behind me, and her attempt to have Dad declared incompetent has failed. For now, Martin cautioned. Rebecca has never been one to accept defeat easily. How prophetic those words would prove to be. Because 3 days later, while driving to meet a potential research partner in Vermont, My car hit a patch of black ice on a mountain curve. The last thing I remember was the guardrail giving way, the sickening sensation of falling, and a single thought: what will happen to Dad now? Consciousness returned in fragments: beeping monitors, hushed voices, the antiseptic smell of hospital sheets. I tried to open my eyes, but my lids felt impossibly heavy. Time had no meaning. I floated in and out of awareness, catching snippets of medical jargon that my foggy brain couldn't process. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, medically induced coma. In my more lucid moments, I wondered about Dad. Was Rebecca taking advantage of my absence? Had all my careful preparations been enough? But these thoughts slipped away, as medication pulled me back into dreams where I was falling endlessly down a snow-covered mountainside. I later learned that my car had plunged nearly 40 feet off the mountain road. A passing truck driver had spotted the wreckage and called emergency services. The rescue team had worked for hours in the freezing cold to extract me from the crumpled vehicle. By all medical assessments, my survival was miraculous. 2 weeks passed before I fully regained consciousness. The first face I saw was a nurse's, middle-aged with kind eyes above her mask. "Welcome back," she said, adjusting my IV. "You've been through quite an ordeal." My throat felt like sandpaper. "How long?" I managed to rasp. 14 days in intensive care. You had us worried. 14 days. 2 weeks during which Rebecca had free rein. Panic surged through me, setting off alarms on the monitoring equipment. "Easy now," the nurse cautioned. "Your body's been through trauma. You need to stay calm." "My father," I whispered urgently. "I need to call about my father." "Your sister has been managing family matters," she assured me, misinterpreting my concern as relief. "She's been here every few days checking on you. Would you like me to call her?" "No?" The force of my response surprised even me. "My phone. I need my phone." She hesitated. "Hospital policy limits phone use in the ICU. Perhaps tomorrow when—" "Please," I interrupted, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's an emergency. Family business." Something in my expression must have convinced her. She retrieved my personal effects from a cabinet, including my phone, miraculously intact though the screen was cracked from the impact. The battery was dead. She found a charger, and the agonizing minutes while it powered up felt like hours. As soon as the screen illuminated, notifications flooded in. Dozens of missed calls, messages, emails. Most were from Martin Calloway. With trembling fingers, I called him. He answered on the first ring. "Emma?" Thank God. The hospital wouldn't. "Tell me anything since I'm not family." "Martin," my voice broke. "Dad, is he?" "He's okay," Martin assured me quickly, physically at least. "But there have been developments." He explained that within days of my accident, Rebecca had moved, swiftly. She told the board I was not expected to survive, creating a leadership vacuum that needed immediate filling. She'd presented falsified medical reports, suggesting Dad's condition had dramatically worsened, necessitating more aggressive intervention. "She tried to challenge the trusts," Martin continued, "claiming your undue influence over your father. When that failed, she petitioned for emergency temporary guardianship, citing the extraordinary circumstances of your accident and your father's supposed rapid decline." My heart sank. "Did she succeed?" "Partially," Martin admitted. "Judge Winters granted her limited financial oversight, nothing that can touch the protected assets, but enough to give her access to his current accounts and medical decisions." I closed my eyes, fighting waves of nausea that had nothing to do with my injuries. "And Dad? Have you seen him?" "Only briefly. She's moved him to Lakeside Care Center, a facility specializing in memory care. The staff limits visitors to an approved list, which conveniently excludes most of his old friends and colleagues. But not you?" "I managed to get in once, claiming I needed his signature on legal documents. He seemed subdued. The staff said he's been adjusting to new medication. Alarm bells rang in my mind. What medication? Dr. Peterson had him on a very specific regimen. Dr. Peterson is no longer his physician. Rebecca brought in someone new, Dr. Raymond Lewis. I didn't recognize the name, which was concerning in itself. Dad's care team had been carefully selected from the best neurological specialists in the region. What about the company? I asked, dreading the answer. She's called for a vote of no confidence, scheduled for next week, without you there to defend your position. The implication was clear. Rebecca was systematically dismantling everything I had worked to protect. I need to get out of here, I said, attempting to sit up. Pain shot through my body and the room spun alarmingly. Emma, you can't, Martin cautioned. From what I understand, your injuries are severe. You need time to heal. We don't have time, I argued, but even speaking left me exhausted and breathless. You've prepared for this, Martin reminded me gently. The most important assets are secure in the trusts. Rebecca can't touch the company's core patents or infrastructure. She can't sell the lake house. What she's gained is temporary control, not ownership. He was right, of course. The trusts we had established were designed to withstand exactly this kind of situation. Still, the thought of Rebecca having any power over Dad's care filled me with dread. We need to document everything, I said finally. Every decision she makes, every change to his treatment, every company action she takes. When I'm recovered enough to challenge her, I want a complete record. Already happening, Martin assured me. I have Chester Williams visiting your father. Weekly as an old friend, Rebecca hasn't realized he's reporting back to me, and I've cultivated sources within the company who keep me informed. This gave me a small measure of comfort. And the board meeting? I'm working on it, Martin said. Several board members have expressed concerns about the hastiness of Rebecca's actions. They might be persuaded to postpone the vote. A nurse appeared at my door, frowning at the sight of my phone. Ms. Mercer, you need to rest now. I nodded reluctantly. Martin, I have to go. Keep me updated and tell Chester. I paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm me. Tell him thank you. After ending the call, I surrendered to the nurse's ministrations, allowing her to adjust my medication and check my vital signs. As drowsiness began to overtake me again, I forced myself to think clearly through the fog. Rebecca believed she had won. She thought my accident had given her the opening she needed to seize everything. What she didn't realize was that I had planned for contingencies far worse than this. The most crucial protections remained intact. As I drifted back to sleep, I made a silent promise to my father. This was not over. Rebecca had made her move, but she had no idea what awaited her when I regained my strength. The real battle was just beginning. Recovery became my obsession. Each day in the hospital was a day Rebecca strengthened her position. Each hour spent in physical therapy was an hour she could be influencing the board or altering Dad's care. My body had betrayed me with its weakness, and I was determined to overcome it through sheer force of will. Dr. Miranda Shaw, my lead physician, watched with growing concern as I pushed myself beyond recommended limits. The human body doesn't heal on your schedule, Emma, she cautioned after finding me attempting to walk unassisted just 3 days after regaining consciousness. Your pelvis was fractured in 2 places. Your lung was punctured. You had a severe concussion. Recovery takes time. Time is exactly what I don't have, I replied, gripping the bed rail as pain radiated through my lower body. Dr. Shaw studied me thoughtfully. This isn't just about physical recovery, is it? Something in her direct gaze broke through my defenses. I explained the situation with Dad and Rebecca, the manipulation, the trusts, the ongoing battle for control that was happening while I lay helpless in a hospital bed. To my surprise, Dr. Shaw didn't dismiss my concerns. "I understand family dynamics can be complicated," she said carefully. "What's your immediate objective? What needs to happen before you feel you can focus on healing?" "I need to attend a board meeting next week," I said, "even if just virtually, and I need to see my father." She nodded slowly. "The video conference might be possible. As for visiting your father, that depends on his location and your condition." "He's at Lakeside Care Center," I told her. "About 30 minutes from here." A flicker of recognition crossed her face. "I know the medical director there, Dr. Winters. We trained together." For the first time since waking, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Could you contact him? Find out about my father's condition, his new medications?" "That would be highly unusual," she hedged. "But I could consult professionally if there were medical reasons to believe your father's care might be compromised." "There are," I assured her, explaining Dr. Peterson's carefully calibrated treatment plan and my concerns about the sudden change in physicians. By that afternoon, Dr. Shaw had made the call. The information she returned with confirmed my worst fears. Dad had been placed on a powerful sedative, one Dr. Peterson had specifically avoided due to its cognitive side effects. His physical therapy sessions had been reduced, and many of his cognitive stimulation activities eliminated. Dr. Winters was quite concerned when I described the previous treatment plan, Dr. Shaw told me. He wasn't aware of Dr. Peterson's protocols or the reasoning behind them. The changes were requested by your sister, who presented herself as having full medical authority. Armed with this information, I asked Dr. Shaw to document her findings and send them to Martin. It wasn't enough to stop Rebecca, but it added to our growing file of questionable decisions. The board meeting presented a different challenge. Rebecca had deliberately scheduled it during visiting hours, knowing hospital policy would limit my access to external communications during that time. Martin had managed to convince 3 board members to push for postponement, but they remained 2 votes short of delaying the meeting. My appearance, even virtually, could sway the undecided. Nurse Paxton, a night shift nurse who had taken a particular interest in my case, provided an unexpected solution. "Hospital policy has exceptions for professional emergencies," he told me, during a late check-in. "If you can get your doctor to approve it as therapeutic for your recovery, you could use the conference room on the 3rd floor. It has privacy and better internet than the patient rooms." With Dr. Shaw's support, she agreed that the mental strain of missing the meeting could impede my physical recovery. The arrangement was approved. Martin coordinated with the board secretary to ensure I would receive the video link. The day. Before the meeting, I received an unexpected visitor. Karen Chen, our company's chief research officer and a longtime colleague, appeared in my doorway carrying a small potted orchid. "You look better than the rumors suggested," she observed. "Riley," I managed a smile. Reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Karen set the plant down and took a seat beside my bed, her expression turning serious. "Rebecca has been aggressive in her approach. She's telling everyone your injuries are catastrophic, with long-term cognitive impairment likely. This didn't surprise me. And the board is believing her? Some are. Others are skeptical but concerned about leadership continuity." Karen leaned forward. "Emma, she's already making changes. She's proposing to sell the Princeton research facility and license out the ME247 patent." I sat up straighter, ignoring the pain the sudden movement caused. The Princeton facility was where we conducted our most promising Alzheimer's research, work inspired directly by Dad's condition. And ME247 was a breakthrough compound Dad had personally developed, one with enormous long-term potential. "She can't sell Princeton without board approval," I said. "And ME247 is protected in the patent trust." Karen nodded. "She's framing the Princeton sale as a strategic consolidation and the ME247 licensing as a partnership opportunity. Some, Board members see it as forward thinking rather than liquidation. This was worse than I'd anticipated. Rebecca wasn't just grabbing for control, she was systematically dismantling Dad's most meaningful work. "I need you to do something for me," I said, lowering my voice. "In my office, second file cabinet, bottom drawer. There's a red folder marked Princeton Expansion. Bring it to the meeting tomorrow." "What's in it?" "Dad's 5-year plan for the Alzheimer's Research Division, complete with projected returns that far exceed what any sale could generate. He finished it just before his diagnosis. It's in his handwriting with his signature. The board needs to see it." Karen agreed to retrieve the folder. After she left, I called Martin to brief him on this new development. "She's overreaching," he observed after I explained Rebecca's plans. "Trying to accomplish too much too quickly. We can use that." We spent the next hour refining our strategy for the board meeting. By the time we finished, I felt more prepared but physically exhausted. The effort of maintaining focus through pain and medication was taking its toll. That night, as I tried to sleep, my thoughts turned to Dad. Was he aware of what was happening? Did he understand that Rebecca had isolated him, changed his treatment? Was he looking for me, wondering why I hadn't visited? The thought of him confused and alone in an unfamiliar facility strengthened my resolve. Tomorrow's board meeting wasn't just about protecting the company or the inheritance. It was about keeping the promise I had made to Dad, that I would protect what mattered most to him, no matter what. With that determination firmly in mind, I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, my dreams filled with boardrooms and mountain roads, with Rebecca's face morphing into something unrecognizable as she reached for things that weren't hers to take. The hospital conference room looked nothing like our sleek corporate boardroom, but it would have to suffice. Nurse Paxton had arrived early to help set up the video equipment, positioning the camera to show only my face and shoulders rather than the hospital bed I was still confined to. "Remember, you're limited to 90 minutes, he reminded me as he adjusted the monitor. Dr. Shaw was very specific about not exceeding that time frame. I nodded gratefully. "I'll make it count." Karen arrived 30 minutes before the meeting, clutching the red folder I had requested. She looked surprised at my appearance. I had convinced a hospital volunteer to help me with light makeup and had changed into a silk blouse Martin had brought from my condo. The effect wasn't exactly professional, but it was a far cry from the pale, injured patient I had been the day before. "You clean up well for someone with multiple fractures," Karen remarked. "Perception matters," I replied simply. "Rebecca's been painting me as incapacitated. I need to appear capable and in control." We reviewed the contents of the red folder together. Dad's meticulous plans for expanding the Princeton facility into a center for advanced neurological research, complete, with projected timelines and financial forecasts. His vision was clear and compelling, a perfect counter to Rebecca's proposal to sell the facility. At precisely 10 a.m., the video conference connected. I found myself facing the 12 members of Mercer Pharmaceuticals' board of directors, and Rebecca, who couldn't hide her shock at seeing me looking relatively composed. "Emma," she recovered quickly, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "We had no idea you were well enough to join us. This is a pleasant surprise." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied evenly, "especially given the importance of today's agenda." Rebecca's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "As I was explaining to the board, your recovery requires our full support, which is why we need to move forward with these strategic decisions in your absence." "I appreciate the concern," I said, "but as you can see, I'm fully capable of participating in company governance. In fact, I've been briefed on all current projects and am prepared to discuss them today." Board Chairman Walter Davis, who had known Dad for 30 years, cleared his throat. "Emma, it's good to see you recovering. Rebecca has informed us that your injuries may require an extended rehabilitation period, possibly with cognitive rehabilitation as well." I met his gaze directly through the screen. "I sustained significant physical injuries, Walter. but my cognitive faculties are completely intact. My medical team can provide documentation to that effect," Rebecca interjected smoothly. "Of course, your determination is admirable, Emma, but pushing yourself prematurely could jeopardize your long-term recovery. We're simply trying to ensure company operations continue seamlessly while you focus on healing." "By selling the Princeton facility and licensing the ME-247 patent?" I challenged. A murmur rippled through the board members. Rebecca's expression hardened slightly. "Those proposals are part of a larger strategic realignment," she explained. "The Princeton facility represents a significant operational cost with uncertain returns. As for ME-247, licensing creates immediate revenue while retaining ownership." I turned to Karen, who slid the red folder toward the camera. "I'd like to present an alternative perspective," I said. "This is a comprehensive 5-year plan for the Princeton facility, developed by Jonathan Mercer himself shortly before his diagnosis." Karen began distributing digital copies to all board members. Rebecca's composure slipped momentarily as she recognized Dad's handwriting on the cover page. "Where? Did you get that?" she demanded. "From Dad's files," I replied calmly. "The plan demonstrates how the Princeton facility is positioned to become our primary research hub for neurological treatments, with projected returns far exceeding any one-time sale value." The board members began reviewing the document, several of them visibly impressed by the detailed projections. "This is quite thorough," noted Dr. Amelia Rodriguez, our most scientifically oriented board member. "Jonathan's approach integrates our existing research streams with emerging technology in a way that could significantly accelerate development timelines." Rebecca attempted to regain control of the narrative. "While my father's aspirations were admirable, this plan was developed before his condition deteriorated. It doesn't reflect current market realities or the company's immediate needs." "Actually," I countered, "the fundamentals remain sound. Karen and her research team have updated the financial projections as recently as last month, confirming the viability of the original concept." Karen nodded. "The potential return on investment has actually increased since Jonathan first developed this framework." For the next 45 minutes, we methodically dismantled Rebecca's proposals, contrasting her short-term liquidation strategy with Dad's long-term vision. Board members who had initially seemed receptive to Rebecca's ideas began asking increasingly skeptical questions about her plans. "It seems premature to divest from Princeton given these projections," Walter finally observed. "And regarding ME-247, I'm concerned about relinquishing control of such a promising compound." Rebecca's frustration was becoming visible. "These are temporary challenges requiring decisive action. Emma's accident has created uncertainty about leadership continuity." "My medical team projects a full recovery within 3 months," I interrupted. "During that time, I'm perfectly capable of fulfilling my duties remotely, with appropriate support from the executive team." Walter nodded thoughtfully. "Given this new information, I propose we table the decisions regarding Princeton and ME-247 until we can conduct a more thorough analysis comparing both approaches." Several board members voiced their agreement. Rebecca's carefully constructed narrative was unraveling before her eyes. As the meeting drew to a close, Rebecca made one final attempt. "There's also the matter of my father's ongoing care to consider. The medical trust Emma established has been creating obstacles to accessing necessary treatments. I had anticipated this angle. The trust was designed specifically to ensure Dad receives consistent, appropriate care based on medical best practices, not to restrict legitimate treatment options. Dr. Peterson, his longtime neurologist, remains available to consult with any physician regarding his established treatment protocols." Walter, who had known Dad longer than anyone else in the room, looked directly at Rebecca. "I visited Jonathan last week. He seemed unusually sedated. His new physician mentioned medication changes but couldn't articulate why they were necessary. Hadn't known about Walter's visit, but I silently thanked him for his perfect timing." "Perhaps," Walter continued, We should request a formal review of Jonathan's current treatment plan by an independent specialist. As his friends and colleagues, we have a moral obligation to ensure his care meets the highest standards. Rebecca could hardly object without appearing callous. Of course, she agreed tightly. Dad's well-being is my highest priority. By the time the meeting concluded, Rebecca's momentum had been effectively halted. No major decisions were approved, and a special committee was formed to review both the Princeton facility plans and Dad's medical care. As the video connection ended, exhaustion washed over me. The effort of maintaining a professional demeanor through pain and medication had drained my limited reserves. That went better than expected, Karen observed, gathering her materials. I managed a tired smile. It's just the beginning. Rebecca won't give up easily. Indeed, as Nurse Paxton helped me back to my room, my phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Impressive performance. Enjoy your small victory. This isn't over. I closed my eyes, allowing the hospital bed to support my aching body. Rebecca was right about one thing. This wasn't over. But for the first time since my accident, I felt the momentum shifting in my favor. The 2 weeks following the board meeting brought steady progress on multiple fronts. My physical recovery accelerated, allowing me to begin more intensive rehabilitation. The board's special committee initiated their review of the Princeton facility, with Karen leading the technical briefings. And most significantly, Walter Davis leveraged his considerable influence to arrange an independent assessment of Dad's care at Lakeside. Dr. Shaw visited me daily, tracking my improvements and gradually reducing my pain medication. During one such visit, she brought unexpected news. I've been in contact with Dr. Winters at Lakeside, she said, checking my vital signs. The independent review Walter arranged has already led to some changes in your father's treatment. They've reduced the sedatives and reinstated several of his previous cognitive therapy protocols. Relief washed over me. Has there been any improvement in his condition? It's too early for dramatic changes, but the staff reports he's more alert and engaged. She hesitated before adding, Your sister isn't pleased with the intervention. Dr. Winters mentioned she's been quite vocal about her objections. I could imagine Rebecca's reaction to having her authority questioned. Has she tried to block the changes? She can't, not directly. The review was conducted by a panel of 3 specialists, including your father's original neurologist. Their recommendations carry significant weight. This small victory provided renewed motivation for my recovery efforts. I pushed myself harder in physical therapy, graduated from the wheelchair to a walker, and eventually to crutches. My determination to see Dad in person grew stronger with each passing day. Martin visited regularly, bringing updates on the legal front. Rebecca's attorney has been making inquiries about challenging the trusts, he informed me during one such visit. They're exploring whether your accident creates grounds for temporary suspension of the trust provisions. On what basis? I asked, incredulous. They're arguing that your extended incapacitation constitutes an unanticipated circumstance that disrupts the trust's intended function. Martin's expression made it clear what he thought of this argument. It's a desperate reach. The trusts were specifically designed to function regardless of either your or your father's capacity. Will it work? Highly unlikely. But it shows how determined Rebecca remains. My suspicions about Rebecca's determination were confirmed the following day when I received an unexpected visitor, Jason, Rebecca's boyfriend. He arrived during afternoon visiting hours, carrying an absurdly large flower arrangement. Emma, he greeted me with practiced charm. You're looking so much better than Rebecca described. I eyed him warily. I'm recovering well. What brings... You here, Jason? He set down the flowers and took a seat, smoothing his designer tie. Just checking in on my future sister-in-law. Family is important after all. The news took me by surprise. You and Rebecca are engaged? Not officially announced yet, he smiled. But soon. We've been discussing our future extensively. I doubted, Jason had come merely to share relationship updates. "How thoughtful of you to visit. Did Rebecca send you?" His smile faltered slightly. "Actually, she doesn't know I'm here. I thought perhaps you and I could speak candidly, away from the tension between you sisters." "About what exactly?" Jason leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This situation is becoming uncomfortable for everyone. The board meetings, the medical reviews, the legal posturing. It's creating unnecessary stress for your father, and frankly, hampering Rebecca's ability to make needed changes at Mercer." "Needed changes," I repeated. "Like selling the Princeton facility? Or licensing Dad's patents?" "Among others," he acknowledged. "Emma, business is about adaptation. Your father built something remarkable, but markets evolve. Rebecca has a vision for modernizing Mercer Pharmaceuticals, making it more agile, more profitable. By dismantling it piece by piece," Jason's expression hardened slightly. "By unlocking its full potential. The Princeton facility alone could generate immediate capital for more promising ventures. The ME-247 patent could be leveraged through strategic partnerships rather than languishing in development limbo." I studied him carefully. "What exactly are you proposing, Jason?" "A compromise," he said simply. "Rebecca is willing to include you in the company's future decision-making. A meaningful advisory role during your recovery, transitioning to a more substantive position once you're fully healed. In exchange for your support in lifting certain restrictions on the trust, allowing for more flexible management of your father's assets, and dropping this unnecessary medical review business." It was suddenly clear why Rebecca hadn't accompanied Jason. This offer was constructed to provide her with plausible deniability if I refused, or worse, recorded the conversation. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "Rebecca wants me to help dismantle the legal protections our father put in place, support her in selling off parts of his life's work, and withdraw concerns about his medical care. In exchange, I might eventually get some unspecified role in whatever remains of the company." Jason spread his hands. "I'm simply suggesting a path toward family reconciliation. This adversarial approach benefits no one. Except Rebecca," I pointed out. "And perhaps you, as her future husband with access to Mercer resources." His smile disappeared entirely. "You're making assumptions about my intentions." "Am I? Tell me, Jason, what exactly is your background in pharmaceuticals?" "I have extensive experience in corporate restructuring and asset management. Asset liquidation, you mean?" I shifted to sit straighter, ignoring the twinge of pain from my healing ribs. "Please convey to Rebecca that I'm not interested in her compromise. The trusts will remain intact, the medical review will continue, and the board will make decisions based on complete information rather than her selective presentations." Jason stood, his facade of friendly mediation evaporating. "This is disappointing, Emma. Rebecca hoped you might be reasonable." "I'm being entirely reasonable. I'm protecting my father's legacy and his care, exactly as he wanted." As Jason turned to leave, I couldn't resist adding, "By the way, congratulations on your upcoming engagement. Have you discussed a prenuptial agreement yet?" Rebecca's quite particular about protecting her assets. The flash of uncertainty that crossed his face told me my parting shot had hit its mark. After he left, I immediately called Martin to report the conversation. "A clumsy attempt at negotiation," Martin observed after I recounted the discussion. "But informative. If they're trying backdoor approaches, it means the direct challenges aren't working. Will they try again? Almost certainly. But with each failed attempt, Rebecca exposes more of her true intentions to others around her. That works in our favor." That evening, as I practiced walking the hospital corridor with my physical therapist, I considered Jason's visit. Rebecca was growing desperate, reaching for allies and approaches that might break through the barriers I had established. What troubled me most wasn't her persistence. I had expected that, but rather the implications for Dad. If Rebecca was willing to go to such lengths to gain control of company assets, how far might she go regarding his care? I needed to see him, and soon. My recovery couldn't wait any longer. The 2 weeks following the board meeting brought steady progress on multiple fronts. My physical recovery accelerated, allowing me to begin more intensive rehabilitation. The board's special committee initiated their review of the Princeton facility, with Karen leading the technical briefings. And most significantly, Walter Davis leveraged his considerable influence to arrange an independent assessment of Dad's care at Lakeside. Dr. Shaw visited me daily, tracking my improvements and gradually reducing my pain medication. During one such visit, she brought unexpected news. "I've been in contact with Dr. Winters at Lakeside," she said, checking my vital signs. "The independent review Walter arranged has already led to some changes in your father's treatment. They've reduced the sedatives and reinstated several of his previous cognitive therapy protocols." Relief washed over me. "Has there been any improvement in his condition?" "It's too early for dramatic changes, but the staff reports he's more alert and engaged." She hesitated before adding, "Your sister isn't pleased with the intervention. Dr. Winters mentioned she's been quite vocal about her objections." I could imagine Rebecca's reaction to having her authority questioned. "Has she tried to block the changes?" "She can't, not directly." The review was conducted by a panel of 3 specialists, including your father's original neurologist. Their recommendations carry significant weight. This small victory provided renewed motivation for my recovery efforts. I pushed myself harder in physical therapy, graduated from the wheelchair to a walker, and eventually to crutches. My determination to see Dad in person grew stronger with each passing day. Martin visited regularly, bringing updates on the legal front. "Rebecca's attorney has been making inquiries about challenging the trusts," he informed me during one such visit. "They're exploring whether your accident creates grounds for temporary suspension of the trust provisions." "On what basis?" I asked, incredulous. "They're arguing that your extended incapacitation constitutes an unanticipated circumstance that disrupts the trust's intended function." Martin's expression made it clear what he thought of this argument. "It's a desperate reach. The trusts were specifically designed to function regardless of either your or your father's capacity. Will it work? Highly unlikely. But it shows how determined Rebecca remains." My suspicions about Rebecca's determination were confirmed the following day when I received an unexpected visitor, Jason, Rebecca's boyfriend. He arrived during afternoon visiting hours, carrying an absurdly large flower arrangement. "Emma," he greeted me with practiced charm. "You're looking so much better than Rebecca described." I eyed him warily. "I'm recovering well. What brings—" "You here, Jason?" He set down the flowers and took a seat, smoothing his designer tie. "Just checking in on my future sister-in-law. Family is important after all." The news took me by surprise. "You and Rebecca are engaged?" "Not officially announced. Yet," he smiled. "But soon. We've been discussing our future extensively." I doubted Jason had come merely to share relationship updates. "How thoughtful of you to visit. Did Rebecca send you?" His smile faltered slightly. "Actually, she doesn't know I'm here. I thought perhaps you and I could speak candidly away from the tension between you sisters." "About what exactly?" Jason leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This situation is becoming uncomfortable for everyone. The board meetings, the medical reviews, the legal posturing, it's creating unnecessary stress for your father, and frankly, hampering Rebecca's ability to make needed changes at Mercer." "Needed changes," I repeated. "Like selling the Princeton facility or licensing Dad's patents?" "Among others," he acknowledged. "Emma, business is about adaptation. Your father built something remarkable, but markets evolve. Rebecca has a vision for modernizing Mercer Pharmaceuticals, making it more agile, more profitable. By dismantling it piece by piece?" Jason's expression hardened slightly. "By unlocking its full potential." The Princeton facility alone could generate immediate capital for more promising ventures. The ME-247 patent could be leveraged through strategic partnerships rather than languishing in development limbo. I studied him carefully. "What exactly are you proposing, Jason?" "A compromise," he said simply. "Rebecca is willing to include you in the company's future decision-making, a meaningful advisory role during your recovery, transitioning to a more substantive position once you're fully healed. In exchange for your support in lifting certain restrictions on the trusts, allowing for more flexible management of your father's assets, and dropping this unnecessary medical review business." It was suddenly clear why Rebecca hadn't accompanied Jason. This offer was constructed to provide her with plausible deniability if I refused or, worse, recorded the conversation. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "Rebecca wants me to help dismantle the legal protections our father put in place, support her in selling off parts of his life's work, and withdraw concerns about his medical care. In exchange, I might eventually get some unspecified role in whatever remains of the company." Jason spread his hands. "I'm simply suggesting a path toward family reconciliation. This adversarial approach benefits no one." "Except Rebecca," I pointed out. "And perhaps you, as her future husband with access to Mercer resources." His smile disappeared entirely. "You're making assumptions about my intentions." "Am I?" "Tell me, Jason, what exactly is your background in pharmaceuticals?" "I have extensive experience in corporate restructuring and asset management." "Asset liquidation, you mean?" I shifted to sit straighter, ignoring the twinge of pain from my healing ribs. "Please convey to Rebecca that I'm not interested in her compromise. The trusts will remain intact, the medical review will continue, and the board will make decisions based on complete information rather than her selective presentations." Jason stood, his facade of friendly mediation evaporating. "This is disappointing, Emma. Rebecca hoped you might be reasonable." "I'm being entirely reasonable. I'm protecting my father's legacy and his care, exactly as he wanted." As Jason turned to leave, I couldn't resist adding, "By the way, congratulations on your upcoming engagement. Have you discussed a prenuptial agreement yet? Rebecca's quite particular about protecting her assets." The flash of uncertainty that crossed his face told me my parting shot had hit its mark. After he left, I immediately called Martin to report the conversation. "A clumsy attempt at negotiation," Martin observed after I recounted the discussion. "But informative. If they're trying backdoor approaches, it means the direct challenges aren't working. Will they try again? Almost certainly. But with each failed attempt, Rebecca exposes more of her true intentions to others around her. That works in our favor." That evening, as I practiced walking the hospital corridor with my physical therapist, I considered Jason's visit. Rebecca was growing desperate, reaching for allies and approaches that might break through the barriers I had established. What troubled me most wasn't her persistence, I had expected that, but rather the implications for Dad. If Rebecca was willing to go to such lengths to gain control of company assets, how far might she go regarding his care? I needed to see him, and soon. My recovery couldn't wait any longer. 3 days after Jason's visit, Dr. Shah finally gave me provisional clearance to leave the hospital for a brief supervised outing. The timing couldn't have been better. The independent medical panel had scheduled their follow-up assessment of Dad at Lakeside that afternoon. 4 hours maximum, Dr. Shah cautioned as she signed the release forms, and only with someone responsible, accompanying you. Your body is still healing, Emma. Pushing too hard now could set back your recovery significantly. Martin arranged to drive me, bringing a wheelchair that I insisted would remain in the car unless absolutely necessary. I was determined to walk into Lakeside on my own 2 feet, or at least with the minimal support of crutches. The 40-minute drive to the facility gave me time to prepare mentally for seeing Dad. Chester Williams had been providing regular updates, but his descriptions of Dad's condition varied from surprisingly sharp to quite confused, depending on the day and time of his visits. "You should know that Rebecca visits him every Sunday," Martin said as we approached Lakeside. "She brings flowers, sits with him for exactly 1 hour, and leaves. The staff says she spends most of the time talking about company matters while—" He listened silently. I shook my head. Even now, she's performing the role of devoted daughter while advancing her agenda. Lakeside Care Center was more impressive than I had expected. A modern facility set on manicured grounds with expansive gardens visible through floor-to-ceiling windows. The reception area featured comfortable seating and soft music, more reminiscent of a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Dr. Eliza Wright, the head of the independent review panel, met us in a small conference room. She was a distinguished-looking woman in her 60s with silver hair and perceptive eyes that missed nothing. "Ms. Mercer, I'm pleased to see you recovering," she greeted me. "I've been working closely with Dr. Peterson to reassess your father's treatment plan." "How is he?" I asked, the question I'd been holding for weeks finally breaking free. Dr. Wright's expression softened. "Improving, now that we've adjusted his medication. The excessive sedation was masking his true cognitive state. With the reduced dosage, we're seeing more periods of lucidity and engagement." "Was there any medical justification for the higher dosage?" Martin asked. "None that I could identify," she replied frankly. "The records indicate the increased sedation was requested due to nighttime agitation, but the nursing notes don't corroborate any significant behavioral issues prior to the change." This confirmed my suspicions that Rebecca had deliberately pushed for medication that would make Dad more compliant and less communicative. "Is he aware of what's happening?" I asked. "With the company, with the family situation?" "It's difficult to assess his full understanding," Dr. Wright admitted. "He has good days and challenging ones, but he has asked about you repeatedly, especially since your accident." My heart tightened. "What has he been told?" "According to the staff, your sister informed him that you were in an accident, but recovering well. She apparently hasn't shared any details about the severity of your injuries." At least Rebecca had spared him that worry. Perhaps some small part of her still cared about his emotional well-being, even as she manipulated his circumstances for her benefit. "Can I see him now?" I asked. Dr. Wright nodded. "He's having one of his better days. Just be prepared. His appearance may have changed since you last saw him." She led us through the facility to a sunlit common area where several residents were engaged in various activities. Dad sat alone by a large window, gazing out at the gardens. Even from a distance, I could see how much he had changed in the weeks since my accident. He seemed smaller somehow, his shoulders hunched, his once commanding presence diminished. As I approached, moving carefully with my crutches, he turned, and for a terrifying moment, there was no recognition in his eyes. Then, his face transformed, lighting up with awareness and joy. "Emma," he said, his voice weaker than I remembered but unmistakably his. "They told me you were in an accident." I eased myself into the chair beside him, fighting back tears. "I was, Dad, but I'm getting better." He reached out with trembling hands to touch my face, as if confirming I was real. "You look like your mother when she was ill, trying so hard to be strong." The observation startled me. Mom had died over 15 years ago, but in that moment, his memory of her seemed crystal clear. "Rebecca said you were fine," he continued, his brow furrowing. "But you're not fine. You're hurt." "I'm healing," I reassured him. "I just needed to see you." His eyes, clouded by disease but still sharp with intermittent clarity, studied me intently. "Something's wrong, beyond your accident. Rebecca has been different, talking about the company constantly, about changes." This was the opening I needed, but I hesitated. How much should I burden him with? How much could his fragile mind process? Dr. Wright, observing our reunion from a discreet distance, seemed to sense my dilemma. She approached and addressed Dad directly. "Jonathan, Emma has been concerned about some of the decisions being made during her absence. About your care and about the company." Dad's focus sharpened visibly. "What decisions?" Carefully, speaking slowly and using simple terms, I explained the situation. Rebecca's attempts to sell the Princeton facility, to license his patents, to change his medication. I didn't mention the trusts or the legal maneuvers, focusing only on the concrete actions she had taken. To my surprise, Dad followed everything, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his understanding. When I finished, he was silent for several long moments, staring back out at the gardens. "I've been foggy," he finally said. "The medication, it made it hard to think, to question. But I knew something wasn't right." Rebecca kept talking about necessary changes and market realities. He turned back to me, reaching for my hand. His fingers felt paper-thin, but his grip was surprisingly firm. "The Princeton facility, it's for Alzheimer's research, for people like me. She wants to sell it?" I nodded, emotion making it difficult to speak. "And my patents? ME247? She's trying to license them to other companies." Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of the formidable businessman he had once been. "Not for research, for profit." "Yes," I confirmed. "No." The word came out forcefully, startling both Dr. Wright and me. "Emma, I built Mercer for a purpose. Not just for profit, for progress, for patience." His voice grew stronger with each word. "Rebecca doesn't understand that. She never has." In that moment, I saw my father, the real Jonathan Mercer, emerge from behind the veil of medication and disease. His mind was connecting the pieces, processing the betrayal with remarkable clarity. "The trusts," he said suddenly. "The protections we put in place. Are they holding?" "Yes," I assured him. "Everything important is secure." Relief softened his features. "Good. That's good." He squeezed my hand again. "You understood. You always understood what mattered." As our visit continued, we talked about simpler things, memories of the lake house, stories from my childhood, his favorite books. But that moment of perfect lucidity had assured me that despite his illness, despite Rebecca's manipulations, Dad was still present, still capable of recognizing the truth when presented with it. When it was time to leave, he held onto my hand, a moment longer. "Come back," he said simply. "Soon." "I will," I promised. "And Dad, things are going to get better, for both of us." He nodded, and for the first time since my arrival, he smiled. A genuine smile that momentarily erased the illness from his face. "I know they will. You're your father's daughter, after all." As Martin helped me back to the car, I felt an unfamiliar lightness despite my physical pain. The visit had accomplished more than I'd hoped. Not only had I seen Dad, but I had witnessed his understanding and approval of my efforts to protect his legacy. Rebecca might have temporarily gained some control, but she had fundamentally misunderstood what mattered most to our father. And in doing so, she had already lost something far more valuable than any inheritance. Rebecca's reaction to my visit with Dad came swiftly. The morning after our reunion, I received a scathing email questioning my interference in Dad's carefully established care routine and accusing me of causing him unnecessary distress. She copied Dr. Lewis, her chosen physician, and Jason on the message, but notably not Dr. Peterson or any members of the independent review panel. I forwarded the email to Dr. Wright, who responded with professional restraint. "Your father showed no signs of distress during or after your visit. In fact, his cognitive assessments today demonstrated improved engagement and recall." Rebecca's next move was more direct. She appeared at my hospital room that evening, just as I was finishing dinner. She wore an impeccably tailored suit and carried a slim leather portfolio, every inch the successful executive. "We need to talk," she announced, closing the door behind her. I set aside my tray. "I assumed we would after my visit with Dad." She remained standing, her posture rigid. "What exactly are you hoping to accomplish, Emma? Besides undermining months of careful work establishing a stable environment for Dad?" "Stable or sedated," I challenged. The panel found no medical justification for his increased medication. Rebecca waved this away. "Dr. Lewis was managing symptoms you weren't around to witness, but that's not why I'm here." She opened her portfolio and extracted a document. "This is a proposed settlement agreement. I suggest you review it carefully." I took the document, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. The settlement proposed that I resign from all positions at Mercer Pharmaceuticals in exchange for a generous compensation package. I would retain my inheritance rights, but relinquish any operational control or decision-making authority regarding company matters or Dad's care. "You can't be serious," I said, looking up from the papers. "Entirely serious. This arrangement allows you to focus on your recovery without the stress of corporate responsibilities. The compensation is more than fair, nearly double your current salary for 5 years. While you dismantle everything Dad built." Rebecca sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "I'm transforming the company to ensure its continued relevance and profitability. The market has changed since Dad developed his original vision." His original vision included finding treatments for the very disease he's suffering from, I pointed out. The Princeton facility isn't just another research center. It's the culmination of his life's work. "It's an emotional indulgence that's draining resources from more viable projects," she countered. "Dad was a brilliant scientist, but his judgment became compromised long before his official diagnosis." The casual cruelty of this assessment stunned me. "You really believe that?" "I know that." She sat down finally, leaning forward with rehearsed sincerity. "Emma, I've been managing Dad's affairs for over a year. I've seen the decline up close, the impulsive decisions, the fixation on pet projects, the emotional attachments to outdated approaches. He needed protection from himself. And you appointed yourself his protector. Someone had to step in. You were too busy with operations to see what was happening." She gestured to the settlement document. "This is an opportunity to resolve our differences amicably. The alternative would be more contentious." I studied my sister, trying to reconcile the woman before me with the girl I had grown up with. Had she always been this calculating, or had something fundamentally changed her? "What happened to you, Rebecca?" I asked quietly. "When did Dad's legacy become nothing more than assets to liquidate?" Her expression hardened. "Don't patronize me. I'm being practical while you're being sentimental. Dad built Mercer to be a successful business, not a memorial. He built it to help people," I corrected her. "The profit was always a means to fund research, not the end goal itself." Rebecca stood, gathering her portfolio. "I see this conversation is pointless. Review the agreement with your attorney if you like, but my offer expires in 3 days. After that, we proceed with more formal measures." As she reached the door, a question that had been nagging at me surfaced. "The accident," I said. "My car was thoroughly inspected just a week before. The mechanic found nothing wrong with the brakes." She turned, her expression unreadable. "What are you implying?" "It's strange, isn't it? The timing. I confront you about Dad's care, and days later, I'm in a life-threatening accident that conveniently removes me as an obstacle." For a moment, genuine shock registered on her face. "You think I had something to do with your accident? That I would—" She stopped, visibly collecting herself. "You need psychiatric help, Emma. Paranoia is apparently another side effect of your injuries." After she left, I sat motionless, replaying her reaction. The shock had seemed genuine, but Rebecca had always been an accomplished performer. Still, attempted murder seemed a dramatic escalation even for her growing desperation. I called Martin to discuss the settlement offer and my unsettling exchange with Rebecca. "The agreement is laughable," he assured me after I described its terms. "It has no legal standing given the existing trust structures. As for your suspicions about the accident, they sound paranoid," I acknowledged. "Not necessarily. I've already initiated a more thorough investigation of the vehicle. The police report was concerning. The brake line appeared to have been compromised, but they attributed it to wear and tear or possible impact damage during the crash." This revelation sent a chill through me. "You think it was deliberate?" "I think it deserves closer examination," Martin replied carefully. "In the meantime, I suggest you avoid consuming anything Rebecca might have access to, and perhaps we should arrange for private security once you're discharged." The conversation left me deeply unsettled. I had believed I was engaged in a battle over assets and control, but perhaps the stakes were even higher than I had realized. The next morning, Walter Davis called with news that shifted the landscape once again. "The special committee completed their review of the Princeton facility," he reported. "We're unanimously recommending not only keeping it but expanding operations according to your father's plan." This was the first unequivocal victory since my accident. "And the board?" "They've accepted our recommendation." Rebecca argued against it, of course, but the financial projections were compelling. There's more. The committee also requested full disclosure of all communications regarding your father's medical care over the past 6 months. "Rebecca won't like that," I observed. "Rebecca doesn't have a choice," Walter replied firmly. "The board is increasingly concerned about possible conflicts of interest in her decision-making. Your visit with your father made quite an impression on Dr. Wright." She spoke eloquently about his moments of clarity when discussing company matters. After we disconnected, I stared out the window at the hospital grounds, processing this development. The tide was turning. Rebecca's carefully constructed narrative was crumbling as more people witnessed the gap between her words and actions. But if she was truly behind my accident, if she was willing to go to such extremes, then her next move might be even more dangerous. And I was still vulnerable, limited by my injuries and confined to the hospital for at least another week. As if confirming my fears, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Watch your back. She's not alone in this." The anonymous text unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. I showed it to Martin, who immediately arranged for a private security consultant to assess potential threats and vulnerabilities. By that evening, a discreet security professional named Diane had performed a thorough review of my hospital room and established protocols with the nursing staff about visitor access. "No one enters without proper identification and advance notice," Diane explained after completing her assessment. "And when you're discharged, we'll have continuous protection until the situation stabilizes." The precautions seemed excessive until Martin shared the preliminary findings from the automotive investigator he'd hired. "The brake line wasn't damaged by normal wear or the impact of the crash," he reported grimly. "It shows clear signs of deliberate tampering, a partial cut that would cause gradual brake fluid leakage, eventually leading to complete failure under stress. Like navigating mountain curves." I tried to process this information, my mind resisting the implications. "Are you saying someone wanted me to crash? That it wasn't an accident at all?" "The evidence suggests so," Martin confirmed. "I've forwarded the findings to Detective Ramirez with the state police. She's reopening the investigation. The idea that someone had deliberately sabotaged my car, had wanted me seriously injured or worse, was almost incomprehensible. And yet the timing aligned too perfectly with my confrontation with Rebecca." "We can't prove Rebecca was involved," Martin cautioned, reading my thoughts. "And making accusations without concrete evidence would undermine our credibility in other matters." "What about the text?" I asked. She's not alone in this. Who would know enough to send that warning? It could be anyone close to Rebecca who's become uncomfortable with her actions, her assistant, a colleague, even Jason if he's having second thoughts about their arrangement. The following morning, Dr. Shaw arrived with welcome news. I was being discharged the next day, nearly a week earlier than originally projected. My recovery had progressed exceptionally well, and I could continue rehabilitation as an outpatient. "You're a remarkably determined patient," she observed. "Just remember that being discharged doesn't mean being fully recovered. You'll still need significant rest and limited activity for at least another month." As Dr. Shaw reviewed my discharge instructions, a hospital volunteer arrived with a floral delivery, a lush arrangement of calla lilies, my favorite. The card read simply, "Wishing you continued healing. A friend." No name, no further identification. I examined the arrangement carefully before allowing it to remain in my room, mindful of the new security concerns. The flowers themselves provided no clues, though the selection suggested someone who knew my preferences. That afternoon, Karen visited with updates about the Princeton facility decision. Rebecca had been noticeably absent from the office since the board committee's announcement, delegating most of her responsibilities to her executive assistant. "The labs are buzzing with excitement about the expansion plans," Karen reported. "Your father's research team can hardly believe they're getting additional resources instead of being shut down." As we discussed implementation timelines, Karen seemed distracted, repeatedly checking her phone and glancing toward the door. "Is everything okay?" I finally asked. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "I shouldn't be telling you this, but you need to know. Heather Nolan contacted me yesterday." The name wasn't immediately familiar. "Who?" "The private nurse Rebecca hired for your father when she first moved him home. She was dismissed when he was transferred to Lakeside." Now I remembered. The nurse, who had consistently been present during my attempted visits, limiting my access to Dad. What did she want? Karen glanced at the door again before continuing. "She has information about your father's care during those months. Specific instructions from Rebecca that made her uncomfortable. She wants to talk to you directly. This could be the friend who sent the text warning, and possibly the flowers. Why didn't she come forward sooner?" According to Heather, Rebecca had her sign an extremely restrictive NDA with substantial penalties for disclosure. "She's risking financial ruin by speaking to you." "What changed her mind?" "She saw the news about your accident, and apparently she overheard something that concerned her deeply." Karen passed me a folded note with a phone number. "She won't talk over the phone or email. She wants to meet in person once you're discharged." I studied the number, uncertain whether this represented a genuine ally or a potential trap. Did she explain what she overheard? Only that it involved Rebecca and Jason discussing next steps if you continued to interfere. She seemed genuinely frightened, Emma. After Karen left, I shared this development with Martin, who approached it with appropriate caution. "We'll need to verify Heather's identity and motivation before arranging any meeting. If she's legitimate, her testimony could be extremely valuable regarding your father's care. And if she's not? Then we've avoided walking into a potentially dangerous situation." Martin promised to have Heather thoroughly vetted before my discharge. Meanwhile, I received another unexpected visitor, Walter Davis, who arrived with a thick folder of board documents. "The ME 247 patent review," he explained, placing the folder on my bedside table. "I thought you might want to see the complete assessment before tomorrow's board call." As Walter settled into the visitor's chair, I noticed something different about his demeanor, a tension that hadn't been present during our previous interactions. "Is something wrong, Walter?" He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Emma, I've been on the Mercer board for nearly 3 decades. I considered your father my closest friend. What I've discovered over the past week is deeply troubling." Walter explained that the board's investigation into ME-247 had uncovered communications between Rebecca and several pharmaceutical competitors dating back nearly 8 months, long before Dad's official diagnosis. In these exchanges, she had discussed potential strategic partnerships involving core Mercer intellectual property, including preliminary terms for licensing arrangements. She was planning this before Dad even began showing symptoms, I realized, aloud. Walter nodded grimly. The timestamps on some of these communications coincide with periods when Jonathan was making significant business decisions Rebecca may have influenced while concealing her external discussions. That could constitute a serious breach of fiduciary duty, I noted, the implications sinking in. More than that, Walter said. Some of these communications potentially cross into corporate espionage territory. Rebecca shared proprietary research, data to demonstrate good faith during these preliminary discussions. This revelation shifted the landscape dramatically. Rebecca's actions weren't just family betrayal, they could be criminal violations. The board is meeting in emergency session tomorrow morning, Walter continued. Rebecca doesn't know about these discoveries yet. I felt you should be prepared for what's coming. As Walter prepared to leave, he paused, his expression softening. Your father always said you were the true inheritor of his vision, not just his business acumen, but his ethical compass. Now I understand what he meant. After he departed, I sat absorbing these revelations. Rebecca's schemes extended further and began earlier than I had imagined. The question now wasn't just how to protect Dad's legacy, but how to contain the damage Rebecca had already done to the company, to Dad's care, and potentially to my own safety. The mysterious text message took on new urgency. She's not alone in this. With evidence of external business communications, the circle of those involved in Rebecca's plans might be larger and more powerful than I had initially feared. As my discharge approached, I realized I was preparing not just to leave the hospital, but to step into an even more complex and dangerous battlefield. The day of my discharge arrived with a tension that felt more like preparation for battle than a medical release. Diane, the security consultant, had meticulously planned every detail of my transition from hospital to a secure temporary residence. A specially modified SUV waited outside, its windows reinforced and its route carefully pre-planned with multiple contingency options. Dr. Shaw reviewed my final discharge instructions, her usual professional demeanor tinged with an undercurrent of concern. Your physical recovery has been remarkable, she said, but the psychological impact of everything you've experienced shouldn't be underestimated. I appreciated her candor. The potential attempt on my life, Rebecca's escalating manipulations, and the complex web of corporate intrigue had taken a toll far beyond my physical injuries. Martin arrived shortly after, carrying a slim briefcase and wearing an expression that suggested he had uncovered something significant. Heather Nolan's background check is complete, he announced without preamble. She's clean. No outstanding legal issues, no financial connections to Rebecca that we can't explain. More importantly, our investigator corroborated several key details from her initial statement. The nurse who might be my unexpected ally was taking an enormous risk by coming forward. Her previous employment with Dad had given her a unique perspective on Rebecca's machinations, and her willingness to speak out suggested she had witnessed something truly disturbing. As the hospital staff completed my discharge paperwork, my phone buzzed with a text from Karen. Board meeting starts in 2 hours. Things are about to get interesting. Walter Davis's revelations about Rebecca's unauthorized communications with pharmaceutical competitors had set the stage for a potentially explosive board session. The preliminary evidence suggested a pattern of behavior that went far beyond simple family conflict. This was potentially corporate sabotage. Diane helped me into the SUV, her professional demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos of the past weeks. We'll take a circuitous route to the safe house, she explained. Multiple checkpoints, No predictable patterns. The safe house, a term that would have seemed melodramatic just months ago, was now a necessary precaution. Located in a discreet, suburban area, it had been selected for its security features and proximity to both the hospital and Mercer Pharmaceuticals headquarters. As we drove, Martin continued briefing me. Heather Nolan wants to meet at a coffee shop near Lakeside Care Center. It's a public location, but we'll have our own security team in place. And Dad? I asked. Will he be safe during all this? Martin's hand briefly touched mine, an uncharacteristically emotional gesture. We've arranged for Chester Williams to visit today, ostensibly as a friend, but actually to ensure no unexpected changes occur to your father's care. The anonymous text message continued to gnaw at me. She's not alone in this. The word suggested a broader conspiracy, something more complex than Rebecca's individual ambitions. What aren't we seeing? I murmured. Martin seemed to read my thoughts. Jason might be more than just Rebecca's opportunistic boyfriend. His background in corporate restructuring could be a carefully constructed cover. We arrived at the safe house, a nondescript two-story home that gave no indication of its current purpose. As Diane conducted a final security sweep, my phone rang. Walter Davis's name flashed on the screen. Emma, he said, his voice tight. The board meeting just concluded. We need to talk. The pieces were aligning. Heather's potential testimony, the board's investigation, the mysterious warning. Something was about to break wide open. And I was finally prepared to see it through, no matter the cost. Rebecca thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea what was coming next. The coffee shop was carefully chosen. A small, independent cafe tucked away in a quiet strip mall, far from the bustling downtown areas where Rebecca might have connections. Diane had scouted the location hours earlier, identifying multiple entry and exit points, potential surveillance positions, and concealed vantage points for our security team. Heather Nolan arrived precisely at 2 p.m., looking over her shoulder, nervously as she entered. She was younger than I expected, mid-30s, with the kind of careful, controlled appearance typical of medical professionals who understood the importance of maintaining a neutral demeanor. Martin had insisted on being present, though he sat at a nearby table, close enough to intervene but far enough to allow Heather a sense of privacy. I noticed her hands were trembling slightly as she set down her coffee, a large black Americano, untouched. Thank you for meeting me, I began softly. Heather's laugh was brittle. I'm not sure I have a choice anymore. What I know? It's bigger than just your family's internal conflict. She pulled a USB drive from her bag, sliding it across the table. Everything I've documented is on here. Text messages, voice recordings, notes from my shifts. I started keeping records when things began to feel wrong. Wrong how? I asked. Your father's care was never the priority, Heather said, her voice low and intense. Rebecca wasn't managing his medical treatment. She was managing his perception. She explained how Rebecca would carefully time her visits to coincide with Dad's most confused periods. She would bring up business matters when he was least capable of challenging her narrative, subtly reshaping his understanding of the company's operations. There were medications, Heather continued. Prescriptions that weren't on his original treatment plan. Dr. Lewis would rotate them frequently, just enough to keep your father in a state of perpetual confusion without raising immediate medical red flags. Martin leaned in slightly, his interest piqued. Can you be more specific about these medications? Heather produced a detailed log, medication names, dosages, dates of administration. I cross-referenced these with the original treatment plan from Dr. Peterson. The changes were subtle but consistent. Each adjustment made your father slightly more pliable, slightly less able to challenge Rebecca's decisions. Did you confront her? I asked. A bitter smile crossed Heather's face. Once, she reminded me of the NDA I'd signed, told me my entire Career could be destroyed with a single phone call. But that wasn't the worst part. She hesitated, glancing around the cafe. Jason, Rebecca's boyfriend, he wasn't just a passive participant. He was actively involved in the strategy. I overheard a conversation about managing the transition that went far beyond typical family business discussions. The USB drive felt heavy with potential. Martin was already mentally cataloging the legal implications of Heather's testimony. "Why come forward now?" I asked. Heather's eyes hardened. "The accident. When I heard about your car crash, something didn't add up." The way Rebecca discussed it, there was a level of calculation that frightened me. It wasn't just about removing you as an obstacle. It felt like part of a larger plan. The mysterious text message echoed in my mind. "She's not alone in this." "Jason's background," Martin interjected. "It's in corporate restructuring. But our investigation suggests he has deeper connections." Heather nodded. "He has contacts in multiple pharmaceutical companies. I heard him discussing potential restructuring of Mercer that went beyond standard business conversations. It felt more like a planned takeover." As she spoke, my phone buzzed, a message from Walter Davis. "Board investigation confirms external communications. Jason has undisclosed consulting contracts with 3 of our competitors." The pieces were starting to align, a carefully orchestrated plan to destabilize Mercer Pharmaceuticals, with Rebecca as the primary actor but not the sole architect. "I'm risking everything by talking to you," Heather said, her voice barely above a whisper. "If Rebecca finds out, she won't," Martin assured her. "We'll ensure your protection." As our conversation concluded, Heather's final words hung in the air. "This is about more than just your father's company. Someone wants Mercer dismantled, and your sister is just a convenient tool." The game had changed. This was no longer just a family conflict. It was a calculated corporate assault with potentially far-reaching consequences, and we were just beginning to understand the true scope of the threat. The safe house became our war room. Martin spread Heather's USB drive contents across a secure laptop, creating a digital web of connections that stretched far beyond our initial understanding. Each document, each time-stamped communication, revealed another thread in a complex conspiracy. "Look at this," Martin muttered, highlighting a series of encrypted emails. "Jason's consulting contracts aren't just with competing pharmaceutical companies. They're with investment firms that specialize in corporate dismantling." Karen arrived, with additional documentation from Mercer's internal systems. Her face was a mixture of professional determination and personal betrayal. "The ME-247 patent wasn't just a potential licensing opportunity," she explained. "It's the linchpin of a much larger strategy." The patent, Dad's most promising neurological research, represented more than just a scientific breakthrough. It was a potential game-changer in Alzheimer's treatment, something Rebecca and her allies clearly wanted to control or suppress. Detective Ramirez from the state police joined our impromptu meeting, her no-nonsense demeanor cutting through the complexity. "The automotive investigation confirms deliberate sabotage of your vehicle," she reported. "Preliminary forensics suggest professional-level tampering, not a random act of violence." Each revelation added another layer to the puzzle. Rebecca wasn't working alone. She was part of a network with specific objectives: dismantling Mercer Pharmaceuticals, controlling the ME-247 patent, and removing any obstacles in their path. "Who benefits most from Mercer's dissolution?" I asked, mapping out the connections on a large whiteboard. Martin pointed to a series of pharmaceutical companies and investment groups. "These firms have been struggling with their own neurological research. ME-247 represents a threat to their existing drug pipelines. Walter Davis's earlier findings about Rebecca's unauthorized communications took on new significance. She wasn't just betraying her family, she was actively working to destroy the company from within." "The board investigation is just the beginning," Walter had told me earlier. What we're uncovering goes beyond corporate misconduct. This looks like a coordinated effort to acquire Mercer's intellectual property through manipulation. Diane, our security consultant, had been quietly monitoring. External communications. We've detected increased communication between Jason and several offshore investment groups, she reported. They're moving quickly, anticipating something. The anonymous text message continued to haunt me. She's not alone in this. Now it seemed prophetic rather than threatening. Chester Williams called with an update about Dad. He's asking questions, Chester reported, more lucid than he's been in months. He keeps mentioning something about protecting the work. As the pieces came together, one thing became crystal clear. This was about far more than family inheritance or corporate control. Someone wanted to suppress the medical breakthrough Dad had dedicated his life to developing. We need to move, I said, looking at the team that had assembled. Rebecca and Jason think they're 3 steps ahead, but they have no idea what's coming. Martin's eyes met mine, a shared understanding passing between us. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, we were ready. The network was about to discover that they had severely underestimated the Mercer family's resolve. The plan came together, with surgical precision. We would set a trap that would force Rebecca and Jason to reveal their hand, using the ME-247 patent as bait. Karen worked with the research team to create a carefully constructed narrative. A seemingly confidential document would be leaked, suggesting Mercer was considering a limited partnership to develop the ME-247 patent. The document was deliberately designed with subtle inconsistencies that would attract the attention of those actively monitoring the company's movements. They won't be able to resist, Martin explained. If they're as invested in acquiring or suppressing the patent as we suspect, they'll make a move. Diane set up a complex digital surveillance network, tracking every communication channel we believed Rebecca and Jason might use. Martin's legal team prepared documentation to capture any potential breach of fiduciary duty. Dad's condition became our unexpected ally. Chester reported that he was becoming increasingly lucid, making strategic comments that suggested he was more aware of the situation than anyone realized. He keeps talking about a final protection, Chester told me during a secure call. Something he put in place years ago that nobody knows about. The leak went out precisely at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Within hours, the first tremors of response began to emerge. Jason made a series of encrypted calls to contacts in 3 different pharmaceutical companies. Rebecca scheduled an emergency meeting with Warren Pierce, the financial advisor who had previously attempted to help her liquidate company assets. They're taking the bait, Karen reported, monitoring the communications. Exactly as we predicted, Detective Ramirez prepared her team. The automotive investigation had provided enough probable cause to justify a broader inquiry into potential corporate espionage. What Rebecca and Jason didn't know was that every communication was being meticulously documented. Each call, each message, each digital interaction was building a case that went far beyond a simple family dispute. Walter Davis called with additional intelligence from the board. They're nervous, he said. Several board members are asking questions about Jason's background that nobody seems able to answer completely. The trap was set. All we needed now was for Rebecca and Jason to make their move. Dad's words to Chester echoed in my mind. A final protection. I couldn't shake the feeling that he had one last surprise waiting, a fail-safe we hadn't yet discovered. As evening fell, the safe house hummed with anticipation. Tomorrow would change everything. The network that thought it could dismantle Mercer Pharmaceuticals was about to learn a painful lesson about underestimating a family's resolve. The final move came unexpectedly, triggered by a sequence of events none of us could have predicted. It began with a call from Chester Williams. "Jonathan wants to see you," he said. "He's asking specifically for you, Emma. And he's more lucid than I've ever seen him." At Lakeside Care Center, Dad sat in a sunlit room, a folder clutched tightly in his hands. His eyes, which had often been clouded, now burned with remarkable clarity. "The last protection," he said simply, handing me the folder. "Something I prepared. Years ago, before the diagnosis, when I first suspected Rebecca might not understand the true purpose of Mercer. The folder contained a series of encrypted documents, patent designs, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. As I read, the full scope of Dad's preparations became clear. He had created a fail-safe mechanism within the ME-247 patent, a complex, scientific mechanism that could only be fully activated by a specific sequence of molecular modifications known only to me and him. The implications were staggering. The patent wasn't just a potential treatment for Alzheimer's. It was a revolutionary approach that could be triggered only by someone who truly understood the original research intent. Simultaneously, our digital trap sprung its full effect. Jason made a critical error, attempting to initiate unauthorized transfer of patent documentation. Detective Ramirez's team was waiting, digital forensics experts capturing every moment of the illegal attempt. Rebecca's carefully constructed network began to unravel. The pharmaceutical companies pulling strings behind the scenes suddenly found themselves under intense regulatory scrutiny. Jason's consulting contracts revealed a web of potential corporate espionage that went far beyond Mercer Pharmaceuticals. The board meeting was a symphony of revelations. Walter Davis presented the documented evidence of Rebecca's attempts to dismantle the company. Jason was escorted out by security, his consulting contracts now the subject of a federal investigation. "Your father's legacy is intact," Walter told me, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and relief. "And it's stronger than ever." Rebecca's final attempt to challenge the trusts failed spectacularly. The legal protections we had carefully constructed, combined with the evidence of her actions, left her with nothing. At Lakeside, Dad looked at me with a clarity that transcended his medical condition. "You understood," he said simply. "The company was never just about profit, it was about progress, about helping people." The ME-247 patent would continue its development, now with full board support and additional funding. The Princeton Research Facility, the project Rebecca had tried to sell, would become a cornerstone of neurological research. As for Dad, his medical team reported significant improvements. The reduced medication, combined with the stress of the family conflict being resolved, had paradoxically improved his cognitive function. Rebecca was left with nothing. No company shares, no inheritance, no reputation. The very tactics she had used to manipulate and control had become her ultimate downfall. "Sometimes," Martin said as we reviewed the final documents, "the quiet ones are the most dangerous." I thought of Dad, of the careful preparations he had, made years in advance, of the legacy he had protected, not through aggression, but through careful, methodical planning. The Mercer legacy was secure, and this was only the beginning. The Mercer Lake House stood exactly as it had for generations, a testament to continuity and preservation. Sunlight filtered through windows that had witnessed decades of family history, casting long shadows across the living room where I now sat with Dad. His recovery had been nothing short of miraculous. The reduced medication, the reduction of stress, and the vindication of his life's work had brought about a remarkable improvement in his cognitive function. While challenges remained, he was more present, more himself than he had been in years. Mercer Pharmaceuticals had not just survived, it had been transformed. The Princeton Research Facility was now a beacon of hope in neurological research, with the ME-247 patent moving into advanced clinical trials. Our team had uncovered groundbreaking approaches to treating neurodegenerative diseases, fulfilling Dad's original vision in ways even he hadn't anticipated. Rebecca was a distant memory now. Her legal battles had stripped her of any remaining professional credibility. Jason faced multiple investigations, his consulting career in tatters. The pharmaceutical companies that had conspired with them were now under intense regulatory scrutiny. Martin joined us, setting down a file folder. "The last of the legal proceedings are complete," he announced. "Jason's final appeal was dismissed this morning." Dad looked at me, a hint of the old spark in his eyes. "You protected everything," he said quietly. "Not just the company, the purpose." Chester. Williams arrived shortly after, bringing updates about the Jonathan Mercer Foundation, a nonprofit we'd established to support neurological research and patient care. It was Dad's way of ensuring that Mercer's legacy extended beyond corporate walls. "The first research grant went out last week," Chester reported, "funding a promising study on early-stage Alzheimer's detection." My phone buzzed, a message from Karen. The research team had made a breakthrough in understanding neural pathway preservation, directly building on Dad's original work with ME247. Heather Nolan, the nurse who had been our unexpected ally, had been offered a position as a medical ethics consultant within the company. Her courage had been instrumental in exposing the truth. As evening approached, Dad pulled out an old photo album. We looked through images of our family, moments of joy, of struggle, of connection. The pictures told a story of resilience, of understanding that true legacy isn't about assets or control, but about purpose and integrity. "I was wrong about many things," Dad said softly, looking at a photo of him with a young Rebecca and me. "But I was right about you, Emma. You understood what truly matters." Outside, the lake reflected the setting sun, unchanged, yet somehow different. Like our family, like the company, it remained, persistent, adaptable, resilient. The Mercer legacy continued, not as a weapon or a prize to be fought over, but as a living, breathing commitment to progress. And we were just getting started. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.